Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all here. I feel, when I'm in this space with all of you, I feel very much at home. And I really appreciate the courage and the conviction of everybody who's participating in this conference. Ambassador, thank you for your remarks. I have to say that what you said and what I'm going to say are very, very similar. So I hope you're not going to be bored by this, but we'll do our best to perhaps offer somewhat of a different perspective. It really is an honor to be with you. I've been coming to Kosovo since 2003, and I've seen enormous progress in this country, and I've made many, many friendships, and I've seen extraordinary work by civil society and by citizens themselves to create the kind of country that Kosovo should be and can be and will be. And I want to thank our partners who have organized the Peace and Democracy Summit. And you've heard from their leaders this morning, the New Social Initiative, a very important and courageous civil society organization. The Kosovar Center for Security Studies, a terrific local think tank, and Espunker, which is a very active and creative organization. And I want to thank each of these organizers for being such good partners with each other and with the rest of civil society in this country. You know, the title of this year's gathering, New World Disorder, Disinformation, Distrust, and Dismantling of Democratic Norms, could not be more fitting, unfortunately. Around the world, we are witnessing a storm of disruption that threatens the very foundations of democratic societies. In your booklet, there's an introductory paragraph describing these conditions, which could have been written about my own country. We too are experiencing serious democratic backsliding, the shrinking of civic space, illiberal and autocratic practices and tactics, the effects of geopolitical volatility, some of which my country is helping to contribute to, and the distorting power of digital disinformation. Here in the Balkans, global headwinds have collided with long entrenched and unresolved regional tensions, deep social and political polarization, and a rising tide of disinformation that distorts the truth and corrodes trust. And yet, by coming together today, we all affirm something vital, that even in this world new disorder, there remains a moral order worth defending and a political order worth reimagining. We must remember that democracy is never finished, never fixed. It must be renewed and reinvented generation by generation, and sometimes moment by moment. What we are facing is not simply a crisis of institutions, but a crisis of confidence, a collapse of shared belief that democracy can deliver justice, dignity, and opportunity. That is why gatherings like KPSD matter so very much, because democracy does not defend itself. It depends on us, on citizens, on journalists, academics, activists, educators, funders, and policymakers working together to resolve crises, to solve problems, to restore trust, and rebuild the kind of connective tissue in our societies. My first visit, as I said here, was in April of 2003, and it was clear even then that civil society was the kind of heartbeat of this country's democracy. That the years ahead from that period were going to be tough. Everybody knew it, and of course they have been. But civil society also knew the important, essential role that they were called upon to play in the democratic project of Kosovo. And in these years since, civil society organizations working with local activists and courageous individuals have done more than deliver needed services or advocate for essential reforms. They have nurtured the habits of citizenship, what de Tocqueville called the habits of the heart, that are essential for vibrant democracy. They have built bridges across divides, given voice to the voiceless, and demanded accountability from those in power. And they have done this work not in easy times, but in profoundly difficult ones, often facing shrinking civic spaces, limited resources, and rising hostility from those who fear the transparency and inclusive participation that genuine democracy requires. It is no exaggeration to say that without civil society, democracy in Kosovo would be far, far weaker. And without civil society, there can be no peace tomorrow. That is why, as an international partner, RBF has long believed that the path to peace and democracy begins not only in the negotiation rooms or in the capital cities, but in communities, in the courage of citizens and the networks of trust they build. For more than 2 decades, we have stood with those who have chosen dialogue over division, truth over propaganda, and participation over exclusion or apathy. The rise of disinformation and narrative warfare, including nationalist narratives, poses one of the most insidious threats to this work. We are all familiar with the tactics: distortion, manipulation, and outright fabrication. But the deeper danger is what disinformation leaves behind in society, a society where people no longer what to believe or whom to believe, a society where every truth seems relative and every disagreement becomes existential. As Hannah Arendt wrote, if everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, it's that nobody believes anything any longer. In such an environment, democracy is absolutely in peril, because democracy depends on a basic level of shared reality. It depends on trust, trust in facts, trust in institutions, and trust in one another. Civil society has a unique role, probably the most important role, in building trust. By creating spaces like this for dialogue and debate and discussion, by defending independent media, by teaching digital literacy, by modeling transparency, civil society can help reweave the social fabric that disinformation works to tear apart. There is one truth we must continue to say out loud, even when it is difficult. There is no lasting peace in Kosovo or the Western Balkans without genuine dialogue between Albanians and Serbs. There is simply no alternative. This dialogue cannot be reduced to negotiations between governments or technical agreements between Brussels and Belgrade. These are necessary for sure, but peace that lives only on paper is peace that will not endure. True peace is made in the daily encounters between neighbors, colleagues, classmates, and communities. It is made in the willingness to listen with empathy to another person's story and recognize that their dignity is bound up in your own. History cannot be rewritten, but it can be transcended. And that process of transcendence begins with dialogue, with the humility to understand and the courage to forgive. Every genuine reconciliation process in the world, from South Africa to Northern Ireland, has rested on this foundation: dialogue that is inclusive, sustained, and human. The Balkans is a region of intertwined destinies. There's no escaping it. No country can succeed in isolation. The health of democracy in one state affects the health of democracy in all. And economic prosperity depends on regional economic integration. That is why regional cooperation and people-to-people engagement are so vitally important. Cross-border initiatives, whether among journalists, youth groups, women's networks, businesses, or municipalities, are not simply nice to have. They are strategic investments in shared stability and prosperity. In a world increasingly defined by fragmentation, the Western Balkans can offer a different story. One of interconnection, cooperation, and local ownership of peace, rather than one of persistent conflict and hatred. I believe that the region's future belongs not to those who inflame old grievances, but to those who build common ground. The promise of European integration remains a bright horizon, but it will only be realized if the region can demonstrate that it can cooperate across borders, communities, and narratives. At the same time, international partners must not turn away. We know that global attention is stretched thin, from Ukraine to the Middle East, to domestic divisions and democracies everywhere. However, disengagement from the Western Balkans comes at a very serious cost. Durable peace and resilient democracy are not inevitable. They are built through sacrifice, patient diplomacy, and sustained international support. To retreat now would be to risk the erosion of hard-won gains. Solidarity is not a one-time act. It is a continuous commitment, a recognition that the struggle for democracy in Kosovo, in Serbia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and elsewhere in the region is part of a global struggle for the kind of world we all want to live in, a world of dignity, pluralism, and freedom. I know that for many in civil society, fatigue is real. We all feel it. The space for action feels smaller, and the threats more sophisticated, and the resources seem increasingly scarce. But the history of Kosovo and the Balkans reminds us that resilience is written into the DNA of this region. Time and again, people here have rebuilt from ashes, turned division into dialogue, and refused to surrender to despair. The same resilience is needed again now, and not just to defend democracy, but to reimagine it, to build a democracy that is both participatory and fully representative, a democracy that values diversity as a source of strength, not division, a democracy that recognizes interconnectedness, not only across ethnic lines, but across generations, across borders, and across the widening gap between citizens and institutions. As we look ahead, let us remember that the struggle for democracy and peace in the Balkans is not a story of victims and heroes, of outsiders and insiders. It is a shared story, a story still being written by all of us in this room. There are no shortcuts, and there are no substitutes for dialogue, cooperation, and trust. But there is also no more noble work that we could do. The task for each of us in our own way is to ensure that amid the noise of disinformation and the fatigue of disorder, the voice of democracy continues to be heard. Because in the end, democracy is not just about elections. It is about the culture we seek to create in our society. It is about how we relate to each other. It's about how we solve problems, whether it's in our families, or at the community level, or at the national level, or internationally. Democracy is a way of living, not just a set of processes and institutions. That is also the essence of peace. It's the essence of democracy, and it is the legacy that we owe to the next generation. Thank you very much.